The rhythmic hiss of the ventilator was the only sound keeping me tethered to reality. Through the heavy ICU glass, I watched my 17-year-old daughter, Amelia, broken in 14 different places. Down the hall, my brother-in-law, Dominic, sipped his black coffee. He looked right at me, lowered his cup, and smiled. What kind of monster smiles at a shattered father? Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. For the last 15 years, my life has been built on absolute control. I am a Navy SEAL. I have spent months deployed in hostile, unforgiving environments, surviving situations that would break most people. I was trained to suppress panic, to analyze threats, and to dismantle enemies with cold, calculated precision. But no amount of military conditioning prepares you for the suffocating, paralyzing helplessness of standing in a sterile hospital corridor, watching your only child fight for her next breath. Amelia is brilliant. She is quiet, deeply observant, and spends hours filling sketchbooks with charcoal drawings of buildings and bridges. She is my entire world. When I was deployed, Amelia would often stay with my younger sister, Brooke, and her husband, Dominic. I trusted them. Dominic always played the part of the loud, jovial uncle who grilled burgers on Sundays and complained about the local sports teams. But looking at him right now, leaning against the hospital wall with that sickening, triumphant smirk, the mask was entirely gone. The man standing 50 feet away from me was not a grieving family member. He was a predator who thought he had won. According to Dominic, it was a botched home invasion. He told the police that he and Amelia were in the garage late at night when two masked men broke in through the side door. Dominic claimed he grabbed a heavy steel pipe from his workbench to defend the house. He swore to Detective Blake that in the dark, chaotic struggle, the intruders overpowered him, wrestled the pipe away, and viciously attacked Amelia before fleeing into the night. It was a tragic, senseless crime. Brooke was inconsolable, weeping in the waiting area while Dominic held her, playing the brave, traumatized husband. The official story sounded perfectly plausible to the local police. But I did not see a crime scene. I saw a battlefield, and the tactics made absolutely no sense. A steel pipe swung by a panicked burglar in the dark leaves random, glancing blows. It causes chaotic, disorganized trauma as the attacker wildly tries to escape. But earlier that night, Dr. Julian, the weary trauma surgeon who worked on Amelia, pulled me aside to look at the x-rays. The 14 fractures on my daughter's arms, ribs, and legs were not random. They were localized, precise, and delivered with overwhelming, repetitive downward force. These were not the frantic, wild swings of a robber. They were meant to punish. Someone had pinned my daughter down and systematically tried to crush the life out of her. I wanted to walk down that hallway, grab Dominic by the throat, and drag him into the parking lot. Every protective instinct in my blood screamed at me to unleash a lifetime of combat training on him until he confessed to whatever sick game he was playing. But I stayed entirely still. Because if I acted like a violent, raging father, I would end up in a jail cell, and Dominic would walk free. Quiet revenge requires absolute patience. It requires you to swallow your burning rage until it hardens into something cold, heavy, and unbreakable. I took a deep, steadying breath, adjusted my jacket, and walked out of the ICU doors toward him. As I approached, Dominic instantly dropped the smile. He replaced it with a perfectly practiced look of exhaustion and sorrow. "Evan," he murmured, his voice thick with artificial emotion. "I am so sorry, man. I tried to stop them. I swear I did everything I could." I stopped right in front of him. I did not yell. I did not threaten him. I just looked him dead in the eyes, letting the heavy silence stretch between us. I watched the slight twitch in his jaw. I noticed the way his knuckles turned white around his coffee cup. He was waiting for me to break down. He was waiting for me to hug him, to seek comfort, to validate his lie. "I know you did exactly what you set out to do tonight, Dominic," I said. My voice was dangerously soft, barely above a whisper. He blinked. A flicker of genuine panic broke through his smug facade, but he quickly masked it with confusion. "Evan, you are in shock. We all are." I did not reply. I simply turned my back and walked away. My tears were finished. Now I had a mission. Later that night, the hospital grew incredibly quiet. The bustling nurses shifted to their night rotations, and the glaring fluorescent lights seemed to dim, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. I sat in a hard plastic chair beside Amelia's bed. The rhythmic hum of the life support machines was hypnotic. Her pale hand felt so fragile inside mine. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the edge of the mattress, whispering quiet promises to her that the man who did this would lose absolutely everything. As I shifted my weight in the uncomfortable chair, my elbow bumped against the mattress, lifting the heavy hospital pillow just an inch. I heard the faint, distinct rustle of thick paper. I frowned, standing up and carefully sliding my hand under the pillow. My fingers brushed against something hard with a spiral wire edge. I pulled it out into the dim light. It was one of Amelia's small black sketchbooks. My heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The paramedics must have grabbed it along with her personal belongings when they loaded her into the ambulance, and a hurried nurse likely tucked it under her pillow for safekeeping. Amelia never went anywhere without a sketchbook, but this one felt entirely different. The cover was violently bent, and the edges of the pages were severely crumpled, as if she had been clutching it tightly in her final moments of consciousness before the attack. I opened the book. The first few pages were normal sketches of houses, park benches, stray dogs. But as I flipped toward the back, the drawing stopped. The final page was not a drawing at all. It was a frantic, deeply indented pencil rubbing. Amelia had placed this page over a piece of hard paper and scribbled back and forth with a charcoal pencil to reveal whatever had been written on the surface underneath. The letters were jagged, hurried, and terrifyingly clear. Across the top of the page, there was a smudge of dried, rusty brown blood, Amelia's blood, and pressed right into the center of the smudge was a single, distinct fingerprint. Beneath the bloody print, the charcoal rubbing revealed a specific address, followed by a series of 4 numbers. I stared at the address, the cold reality settling over me like a heavy blanket. I knew that street. It was an industrial park on the edge of town. It was the exact location of Dominic's private, off-site storage facility. My brilliant, brave daughter had not been attacked by random burglars. She had discovered something massive. She had found a trail of secrets, copied the location, and hidden the evidence right before Dominic could take it from her. He smiled at me in the hallway, because he thought he had successfully silenced the only witness to his lies. He had no idea that he had just handed a map directly to a man who spent his entire life hunting monsters in the dark. The police were wasting their time looking for phantom intruders. But I was going to tear Dominic's hidden world apart piece by piece. The quiet war had just begun. The midnight air was biting and damp as I parked my truck 2 blocks away from the industrial park. I did not wear black tactical gear. I wore a simple dark jacket and a baseball cap. In my world, invisibility is not about looking like a shadow, it is about looking like you belong exactly where you are standing. I approached the perimeter fence with the calm, methodical pacing of a night watchman. The security at the off-site storage facility was laughable. A single, rusted chain-link fence and a camera system that blindly swept back and forth on a predictable 15-second loop. I timed the rotation, slipped through a gap near the drainage ditch, and vanished into the labyrinth of corrugated metal corridors. Amelia's hidden message pointed me directly to Unit 402. I stood before the roll-up door. A heavy-duty, hardened steel padlock secured the latch. Most people would try to cut it, but cutting leaves physical evidence. Instead, I pulled a small tension wrench and a rake pick from my pocket. It took me less than 40 seconds to feel the pins set into place. The lock popped open with a quiet metallic click. I rolled the door up just enough to slide my body underneath, then softly pulled it shut behind me. Plunged into total darkness, I clicked on a small tactical flashlight fitted with a red lens. The crimson beam swept across the dusty concrete floor, revealing stacks of cardboard boxes, old furniture, and a tarp draped over something massive in the center of the room. I pulled the heavy canvas tarp back. My breath caught in my throat. Beneath the tarp were not household goods or old antiques. They were reinforced pelican cases, stamped with faded serial numbers that I recognized instantly. I unlatched the nearest case. Inside, resting in custom-cut foam, were military-grade thermal imaging optics, advanced laser aiming modules, and classified communication arrays. This was restricted defense material. It was the exact type of highly regulated equipment my unit relied on overseas. Dominic was not just a greedy brother-in-law. He was fencing stolen military hardware to the highest bidder. My teenage daughter, an aspiring architect who loved to explore and sketch, had stumbled across his inventory. She must have been looking for an old paint set or canvas in the garage, only to find him moving this illicit cargo. I moved to the back of the unit and found a heavy steel drop safe bolted to the floor. I pulled out Amelia's sketchbook rubbing. A 4-digit sequence was etched right beneath the address, 8204. I punched the numbers into the electronic keypad. A green light flashed, and the heavy door swung open. Inside the safe sat a thick leather binder and a stack of financial ledgers. I opened the binder, flipping through pages of wire transfers, routing hundreds of thousands of dollars into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. But it was the next document that made my blood run entirely cold. It was a property deed for a luxury vacation home, accompanied by a signed trust agreement. I dragged my red flashlight across the signature line. Brooke, my own sister. Her signature was placed right next to Dominic's on the offshore banking documents. I dug deeper, finding printed copies of a text message thread. Dominic had written, "The inventory is secured, but Evan is back from deployment early. We need to be careful." Brooke's reply sat right below it. "Keep him busy. He is too focused on his daughter to notice what you are moving. If we lose this deal, we lose the new house. I will not go back to being broke." The betrayal hit me harder than any physical blow I had ever taken in combat. Brooke knew. She might not have known that Dominic would brutally attack her niece with a steel pipe, but she absolutely knew the man she married was a criminal. She knew the wealth they flaunted was soaked in treason, and she actively chose to protect her lavish lifestyle over the safety of my family. She had stood in that hospital corridor, weeping into the arms of the man who crushed Amelia's bones, knowing exactly what kind of monster she was holding. If your own flesh and blood protected the monster who hurt your child for the sake of a luxurious lifestyle, what would you do? Tell me in the comments down below. I did not scream. I did not destroy the unit. Instead, I pulled out my phone and meticulously photographed every single page, every ledger, and every serial number. When I was finished, I placed the binder exactly where I found it. I locked the safe. I draped the tarp perfectly over the pelican cases. I slid under the metal door, relocked the padlock, and wiped away any trace of my footprints. I left the storage locker exactly as Amelia had found it. The next morning, I returned to the hospital. My demeanor had shifted entirely. I played the part of the broken, defeated father perfectly. I slumped in the chair by Amelia's bed, my eyes red and vacant. Dominic walked in an hour later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one, his arrogant confidence fully restored. He thought he had won the psychological war. "The police called this morning, Evan," Dominic said softly, taking a seat beside me. He leaned in, lowering his voice in a fabricated tone of concern. "They think the burglars might have been targeting the house because of you, because of your military background. Maybe someone you angered overseas tracked you down. It was a brilliant, sick manipulation. He was trying to plant the seed that Amelia's attack was my fault. He wanted me to drown in guilt so I would stop asking questions." I looked down at my coffee, letting my shoulders sag. "Maybe you are right," I whispered, forcing a slight tremor into my voice. "Maybe I brought this on her. I do not know what to do anymore, Dominic. I am just so tired." He reached out and patted my shoulder. "We will get through this as a family, Evan. I promise you." The physical restraint it took to not break his wrist right then and there was monumental. But I simply nodded, thanking him for his support. He smiled, stood up, and left the room, entirely convinced that the threat was neutralized. He had no idea that I had already built his gallows. That night, a heavy rain washed over the city. I was sitting in my dark living room, organizing the photographs from the storage unit into encrypted digital files, when a soft, sharp knock rattled my back patio door. I instantly closed my laptop and moved silently to the kitchen window. Standing in the pouring rain, looking over his shoulder, was Detective Blake. He was not wearing his badge or his standard police windbreaker. He looked deeply exhausted and profoundly nervous. I unlocked the door and let him step out of the rain. He did not say a word at first. He just stood in my kitchen, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. "I should not be here, Evan," Blake finally muttered, his voice tight with anxiety. "If anyone finds out I came to your house, my career is over." "Then why are you here?" I asked calmly. He reached inside his wet jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Across the front, stamped in bold red ink, were the words, "Internal Affairs Evidence." I started digging into Dominic's background check, just to rule him out, Blake explained, handing me the envelope. I requested access to some federal files. I got blocked immediately, but a buddy of mine in a federal task force owed me a massive favor. He pulled this from a surveillance file before they sealed it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single high-resolution photograph taken from a distance. It showed Dominic standing in a dimly lit parking garage, exchanging a heavy briefcase with another man. I stared at the second man's face, the floor dropping out beneath me. The man shaking Dominic's hand was not some random street criminal. He was wearing a dark, formal uniform. Pinned clearly to his chest was a high-ranking Navy badge. It was a man I had served under. A man who commanded my unit 3 years ago. The conspiracy was not just in my family. It went all the way up the chain of command, and my daughter was caught right in the middle of a massive military treason ring. I stood in my dimly lit kitchen, staring at the photograph of Dominic shaking hands with Commander Victor. The heavy rain continued to pound against the window glass, but all I could hear was the slow, rhythmic thud of my own heartbeat. Victor had been my commanding officer during my second deployment. He was a man who preached honor, duty, and sacrifice, while secretly selling classified military hardware out the back door. Dominic was his civilian fence, moving the stolen equipment through the off-site storage unit. The anger inside me was no longer a burning fire. It had turned into absolute freezing ice. I looked at Detective Blake, who was still dripping rainwater onto my hardwood floor. "We cannot go to the local precinct with this," I said quietly. "If Victor is involved, he has eyes everywhere. He will scrub the storage locker clean before you can even type up a warrant." Blake nodded slowly. "I know. That is why I took this straight to Federal Judge Preston. He is old school, entirely disconnected from the local politics. He signed a federal wiretap and search warrant an hour ago. We have a tactical team on standby, Evan. We just need to catch Dominic in a lie so massive he cannot slip out of it." I did not want Dominic to just be arrested in his sleep. I wanted to look into his eyes as his entire world collapsed. I wanted to psychologically dismantle him the way he had physically dismantled my daughter. "Give me until tomorrow night," I told Blake. "I will bring him to the house. I will give you the confession on a silver platter." The next afternoon, I called my sister, Brooke. I made my voice sound hollow, shaky, and utterly defeated. I told her the hospital bills for Amelia's reconstructive surgeries were bankrupting me. I said I needed to sign over my military pension and the deed to my house, and I needed Dominic to help me understand the legal paperwork. Brooke played the part of the weeping, supportive sister perfectly. She promised they would be right over. When they arrived at my house that evening, the air was thick with false sympathy. Dominic walked through my front door wearing a crisp, expensive suit, looking around my modest living room with an air of absolute superiority. He sat down in my favorite leather armchair, crossing his legs comfortably. Brooke sat beside him, clutching her designer handbag, a bag paid for by the blood of my unit and the broken bones of my daughter. "Evan, we are here for you," Dominic said, using that same soft, practiced voice he used in the hospital corridor. "Whatever you need to sign, I will make sure the lawyers handle it smoothly. You just focus on Amelia." I stood by the fireplace, looking down at them. "I appreciate that, Dominic," I said. "I actually printed the documents out. They are right there on the coffee table." Dominic leaned forward, a faint, arrogant smile touching the corners of his mouth. He thought he was about to watch me financially ruin myself. He reached out and flipped open the heavy manila folder. But there were no medical bills inside. The first page was a high-resolution printout of Brooke's offshore trust fund, highlighting the massive wire transfers from the Cayman Islands. Dominic froze. His hand hovered over the paper as all the color instantly drained from his face. Brooke leaned over to look, and a sharp, terrified gasp escaped her throat. Slowly, with trembling fingers, Dominic turned to the second page. It was the inventory manifest from his storage locker, complete with the serial numbers of the stolen tactical equipment. The third page was the photograph of him shaking hands with Commander Victor. "What is this?" Dominic whispered, his voice completely stripped of its confident warmth. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with rising panic. Evan, where did you get this? You thought you were a mastermind, I said softly, my voice echoing in the dead silence of the living room. You thought you could beat a 17-year-old girl half to death and just walk away. You thought I was just a grieving father. Dominic suddenly stood up, his chest heaving. The polite mask was gone, replaced by the cornered, vicious animal I knew he truly was. You listen to me, he snarled, stepping toward me. You have no idea who you are dealing with. If you show these to anyone, Victor will have you buried in a desert. I did not flinch. I did not take a step back. I just stared right through him. Sit down, Dominic. Or what? He spat, balling his fists. Or you will miss the best part of the story, I replied. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen. You see, Amelia is brilliant. You thought she just hid a sketchbook with an address, but she is a modern teenager, Dominic. She wears a smartwatch. I pressed play. The audio was perfectly clear. It filled the living room. It was the sound of Dominic's own voice, recorded in his garage on the night of the attack. You should not have looked in the boxes, kid. Now you are going to ruin everything. Then came the heavy, sickening sound of the steel pipe striking concrete, followed by Amelia's muffled cry. Brooke covered her face with her hands and began to violently sob. She had known about the stolen money, but hearing the audio of her husband trying to murder her niece shattered whatever delusion she was living in. Dominic stood entirely paralyzed. His jaw trembled. The sheer weight of his inescapable ruin crushed the air out of his lungs. She set her watch to auto-record when her heart rate spiked, I explained quietly, and she set it to upload to my secure cloud server the moment it connected to a Wi-Fi network. It took the servers 48 hours to decrypt the file. I did not even need a confession from you, Dominic. My daughter caught you from a hospital bed. Before Dominic could say another word, the heavy wooden door to my kitchen swung open. Detective Blake stepped into the living room, followed by 4 federal agents wearing tactical vests. Dominic, Blake said, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest for treason, fencing stolen military property, and the attempted murder of Amelia. Brooke, you are under arrest for conspiracy and accessory to treason. Dominic did not fight. He did not yell. He just stared at me, his eyes completely hollowed out. I watched as they forced his hands behind his back and marched him out of my front door into the flashing red and blue lights of the waiting federal cruisers. I had not laid a single finger on him, but I had absolutely crushed his skull. He was going to spend the rest of his natural life in a federal penitentiary. A month later, the morning sun poured through the windows of the hospital room. I was sitting in my usual plastic chair, reading a book, when I felt a faint pressure on my hand. I looked up. Amelia was looking at me. Her eyes were tired, but they were clear. She did not remember the pain. She did not remember the terror of the garage. She just squeezed my fingers and offered a small, crooked smile. I am right here, sweetheart, I whispered, tears finally falling freely down my face. Everything is okay now. He is gone. We are safe. The quiet war was over, and the long, beautiful road to healing had finally begun. If you found out your own sibling chose money over your child's life, could you ever find it in your heart to forgive them? Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Please drop your city or country down below. If you found value in this journey of justice, I would be truly honored if you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. It helps us grow and keep bringing you high-quality content. Also, please tell me in the comments what kind of stories you want to hear next. Do you prefer quiet revenge, deep family drama, or thrilling mysteries? Let me know, and I will bring exactly those types of stories just for you. We will see you in the next thrilling, epic revenge story. Until then, take care of yourselves and your loved ones.